Hello, today is November 10th, 2013, and pretty much off the cuff, I'm going to recommend a movie, and it's called Kill Your Darlings. I don't have all the info on who played what, although I know that Daniel Radcliffe played the young Allen Ginsberg. Michael C. Hall plays this guy who wound up being killed by a friend of Ginsberg, and I forget who plays the friend. It's all very well acted. I am not someone who reads the beats. I've of course read On the Road, and I read Big Sur, and you can't escape hearing some of the poetry of Ginsberg and of, knowing a certain amount about William S. Burroughs, who also figures in this movie. In any case, I think I have an advantage in seeing it for not knowing that much about the beats. I was able to focus on the pure drama of it, and I have to tell you, this plays like a tragedy. And it also is very informative about how the beats became such an iconic circle of poets and writers. You're going to have some spoilers here, so if that really gets to you, I wouldn't keep watching the video. After the killing, or the moment of the killing, you see the various characters in their little moments, because they're not all at the same place at the same time at all. And you see Burroughs with his heroin addiction. You see Kerouac learning of the death of a friend of his in combat in the Second World War, because this is in the middle of the war. And Kerouac, I think, had been in the Merchant Marine, maybe even been in the Navy, I don't know. But, for one reason and another, was out of it by the middle of the war. I imagine he had psychological difficulties. I think I've heard something like that, but I don't think that's scandalous at all. We're talking about a legendary writer here. In any case, you have a very good depiction of the transformation of Ginsberg from a good son into someone who will try to be a good friend to people, and someone with a backbone and it's interesting. He is overlooked by a lot of people around him, but he becomes obviously this major poet. I believe the best-selling poet of the 20th century. I, for one, can say that I went to a Dylan concert at Roseland, I think in 1995, maybe 94. There was a booth. It said VIP. It literally said VIP, and there was a rope around it. And all these A-list celebrities were sitting there while Dylan was performing, Dylan being a few yards away, and I was in the standing room only, which was actually very close to Dylan. And I look over, and there's Ginsberg sitting at the very edge of the VIP section at a little table in a chair, alone, watching very intently, watching Dylan's performance, tapping his feet. And one by one, the A-list celebrities kept coming up to Ginsberg during the show and trying to interrupt his watching of Dylan playing. And Ginsberg would sort of brush them away. Nothing dismissive, but he would, move his hand. He was paying attention. That's a characteristic that is borne out in this movie. So just having watched him in old age, shortly before he died, being there for a friend of his who gave one of the best performances I've ever seen Dylan do. Dylan emoted like Chaplin. It was great. I was impressed with him, with Ginsberg at that moment. And in any case, the movie shows your typical college pranks that artistic types are prone to, the sort of stuff I hate. They're going into the library and cutting up sections of books and pasting the words in different places. Pain in the ass. But that sets you up for the real horrific stuff that happens a little later. Um, the days of location shooting are gone. You get a couple of location shots outside one of the buildings of Columbia University. You see something that looks an awful lot like Riverside Drive. I lived across from Riverside Drive, from Riverside Park, that is. I'm talking about Riverside Park. I lived across from that from 0 to 5, and the movie makes it look like that, but it also looks enough like a little studio shot, and you don't really see anything to indicate that this is location shooting in the way that Scorsese used to do in the 70s. I wish they'd be able to really show them really walking around New York with something convincing shots, but it was with their budget limitations, they went far. This is a very good story. Obviously, it's skewed in favor of Ginsberg. His estate seems to have provided a lot of photographs that are shown in the closing credits of the real beats. The acting is universally good. I think the best performance is perhaps Ginsberg's mother. And the guy who plays Lucian Carr, Ginsberg's friend, is a really good actor. Daniel Radcliffe is actually, he's proved himself to be quite the three-dimensional actor. He was in, I think it's called My Boy Jack, about Rudyard Kipling's son. This movie highlights the relationship between the Beats and the previous generation, parents, teachers, etc. I never knew, because I don't know much about the Beats, that Ginsberg's father was a well-known poet named Louis Simpson. I've run across his poetry in a lot of anthologies. At the beginning of the movie, I'm thinking, okay, now we're seeing the household. You know, the father's going to try to discourage him from being a poet, and then I see the father is telling the son he's got to write some poetry of his own and not simply mimic himself. And he quotes some lines that he himself wrote. It's really, I learned a certain amount, and I take a lot of it with a grain of salt because they're varying accounts of this thing. But the movie set out to prove something about how a sort of poetic movement is formed not by deliberation but by mishap. And it also makes the case that that Lucian Carr was acting in something, a tragedy that was inevitable for himself, and that Kerouac and Burroughs and Ginsberg, in a sense, avoided a tragedy of their own, even though, by any accounts, you would say their lives were full of misfortune. Ginsberg, of course, comes off looking rather sage in this, and I imagine he was, because he's the guy whose collections of photos and archives were very thorough, and he seems to have, before he died, set up quite the estate full of archives. In any case, I also didn't know Burroughs came from wealth, had no idea. Neither here nor there. But I also have to say Ginsberg is the most handsome person in the movie, which there's a little bit of fiction there, but we do know he was a dynamic figure, and you do see some of the real early photographs of him, and you can see, he does sort of look like, sometimes when he wants to, a very streetwise kind of guy. And he was, of course, I remember reading the National Review, an arch-conservative magazine founded by Buckley, had an article in the late 80s by Jeffrey Hart saying, we disagree with Ginsberg politically, but this is the best poet in our history. So I would recommend seeing the movie, particularly if you know something about the Beats. You'll be prepared for it. A lot of people in the audience, a New York audience, seem to have been a little mystified by it. I heard people muttering to each other, well, that was weird. Then you hear other people saying, I really liked it. There was a bit of laughter throughout the movie, laughing with the movie, but I'm not sure they were supposed to be laughing with the particular things the movie was presenting. So they seem to have enjoyed it, but I'm not sure that they got the same things out of it I did. And that's what I have to say. Thank you.